In the wild world of rock and roll, some feuds become legendary, but when Ronnie Van Zant crossed paths with Mick Jagger, it sparked a confrontation that would echo through music history. Here's the untold story. The birth of a rebel. Jacksonville, 1948. A star was born into a family that had fighting in its blood. Ronnie Van Zant's father, Lacey, wasn't just your average truck driver. Behind that steering wheel sat a former prize fighter who made sure his sons could both take and throw a punch with the best of them. Young Ronnie spent countless hours riding shotgun in his father's truck, the radio becoming his first music teacher and the open road his classroom. At just 16, Van Zant's musical journey began with a short-lived band simply called Us. When that venture crumbled, he didn't miss a beat. Instead, he gathered a group of talented youngsters, some as young as 13, to form My Backyard. The lineup included Bob Burns, Gary Rossington, Alan Collins, and Larry Johnstrom. Together, they created something electric. These young rockers, rebranded as Noble Five, started playing anywhere that would have them. Payment, usually just enough gas money to get to the next gig, and a few drinks. But they weren't in it for the money. They were in it for the music. Hell House and Growing Pains. Practice makes perfect, but finding a place to practice proved challenging. The band bounced from one parent's house to another, their powerful sound drawing constant complaints from neighbors and frequent visits from local law enforcement. That's when Van Zant's father stepped in, helping them secure an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. This decrepit building, which they affectionately dubbed Hell House, became their sanctuary. It wasn't much, small, sweltering, and falling apart, but it was their creative haven. Far from the suffocating constraints of suburbia, they could finally let their music soar without restriction. Identity crisis and rebellion. The band went through numerous identity changes, performing under an array of colorful names: Wildcats, the Sons of Satan, Conqueror Worm, the Pretty Ones, and 1%. But their true identity emerged through their rebellious spirit, particularly during their high school days at Robert E. Lee High. The school's strict dress code became their first battlefield. No long hair below the collar, mandatory belts, tucked-in shirts, and socks at all times. It was everything rock and roll stood against. Van Zant cleverly circumvented these rules by slicking his hair with Vaseline to keep it off his collar during school hours. However, one observant gym coach saw through this ruse, frequently catching Van Zant and his bandmates in the post-gym shower with their forbidden long locks on full display. These confrontations with authority only fueled their determination. Each trip to the principal's office, every suspension, served as another brick in the foundation of their rebellious reputation. It wasn't just about breaking rules, it was about standing up for their identity in a world that seemed determined to conform them. The birth of a legend. The tension finally boiled over when Rossington, fed up with the endless harassment about their hair, delivered a defiant gesture to the gym teacher and walked away from education altogether. But sometimes the greatest moments in rock history stem from acts of rebellion. During a packed show at the Forest Inn, surrounded by current and former Robert E. Lee High School students, Van Zant had an epiphany. With a mischievous grin, he announced they'd be changing the band's name, inspired by none other than their straight-laced nemesis, Lynyrd Skynyrd. And just like that, Lynyrd Skynyrd was born. Love, loss, and rock and roll. With their new identity and increasingly refined sound, the band became Jacksonville's hottest act. But Van Zant's personal life was as turbulent as their music. In the mid-60s, he met Nadine Inco, and by January '67, wedding bells were ringing. Their daughter Tammy arrived soon after, but domestic bliss proved elusive. Van Zant found himself working at his brother-in-law's auto parts store, seemingly shelving his rock and roll dreams. But you can't cage a wild spirit. The marriage crumbled in 1969, coinciding with Van Zant meeting Judy Seymour. This new romance blossomed into marriage, and another child followed. The personal upheaval seemed to fuel his creative fire, driving him back to his true calling, music. The long road to success. By 1970, Lynyrd Skynyrd had recorded their first demo, catching the attention of Capricorn Records, but Van Zandt, showing remarkable foresight, did something that left everyone stunned. He turned them down. Instead, he chose 3 years of relentless touring, countless dive bars, and endless hours of practice. This grueling period shaped their signature sound, blending Southern authenticity with British invasion influences. Van Zandt never saw himself as just another Southern rocker. He aimed higher, crafting what he called a continental sound, a unique fusion that paid homage to their British heroes while maintaining their Southern roots. The gamble paid off when MCA Records came calling in 1973 with an offer they couldn't refuse. Rise to stardom. Their debut album exploded onto the scene, featuring instant classics like Simple Man and their magnum opus Freebird, a song Van Zandt remarkably composed in just 3 minutes. The band's legendary status was cemented during their 1976 live album recording when a simple audience interaction spawned a cultural phenomenon. When fans shouted for Freebird, the band delivered an epic 14-minute performance that would inspire decades of concertgoers to request the song at shows by everyone from Nirvana to Bob Dylan. Van Zandt's stage presence was as distinctive as his music. He performed barefoot, feeling more connected to the music and the moment. But don't mistake this free spirit for weakness. His notorious temper was as legendary as his vocals. In 1975, he made headlines for hurling a table through a hotel window, and his bandmates knew well enough to stay in line, especially after he caught one drinking wine on stage. This was rock and roll, after all, not a wine tasting. The dark side of success. Van Zandt's reputation for violence wasn't just for show. During performances, he'd keep a watchful eye on his bandmates, ready to enforce his strict code of conduct. Once, he caught a band member sipping wine during a song and responded with a swift punch to the mouth. When another bandmate was caught ogling a fan, he received the same treatment. In Van Zandt's world, a punch was his way of showing mercy. By the mid-1970s, Lynyrd Skynyrd had earned a reputation that matched their hard-hitting sound. They were notorious hard drinkers and fighters, leaving a trail of destruction wherever they went. Their dressing rooms often looked like war zones after their visits, and when they couldn't find external opponents, they'd turn on each other. Their press agent, rather than trying to hide these incidents, embraced them as part of the band's wild mystique. The price of fame. Success came at a steep price for Van Zandt. By 1976, his rap sheet included more than a dozen arrests. Former drummer Artemis Pyle painted a vivid picture of Van Zandt's volatile nature. "I loved and respected Ronnie Van Zandt, but I've seen the man transform into the devil right before my eyes and hurt people." Despite their wild behavior, the band's musical success continued to soar. Following their debut, they released 4 more albums between 1974 and 1976, including the iconic Sweet Home Alabama. However, their meteoric rise proved too intense for some members to handle. 1976 brought 2 devastating setbacks. Guitarist Alan Collins, under the influence of alcohol, crashed his car into a parked vehicle, causing chaos in a parking lot. Shortly after, Gary Rossington, impaired by drugs and alcohol, fell asleep at the wheel of his new car, taking out a telephone pole, splitting an oak tree, and causing significant property damage. The accident was so severe that the band had to cancel upcoming tour dates. Van Zandt's response, he fined each of them $5,000. The Mississippi Kid's prophecy. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Van Zandt's story came from his father, Lacey, who revealed in 1995 that Ronnie possessed second sight. Van Zandt had repeatedly predicted he wouldn't live to see his 30th birthday. While his loved ones grew weary of this dark prophecy, its accuracy would prove haunting. On October 17, 1977, Lynyrd Skynyrd released Street Survivors. The album cover, showing the band surrounded by flames, would become an eerie harbinger. In the months before, backup singer JoJo Billingsley noticed Van Zandt referring to himself as the Mississippi Kid, despite being Florida-born and raised. 3 days later, on October 20th, Van Zandt's prediction came true. The band's plane, en route from South Carolina to Louisiana, ran out of fuel over Gillsburg, Mississippi. As the aircraft plummeted, it struck a tree, causing Van Zandt to suffer a fatal head injury. He was 29 years old, just 87 days short of his 30th birthday. The crash also claimed the lives of guitarist Steve Gaines and his sister, vocalist Cassie Gaines, marking a tragic end to an era in Southern rock history. The flames that once adorned their album cover became a haunting reminder of their fate, and Van Zandt's mysterious connection to Mississippi was finally tragically realized. The final journey. Among those who survived the devastating crash, several sustained severe injuries that would haunt them for life. The funeral that followed was a testament to Van Zandt's impact on the music world. Attendees, overcome with grief, literally collapsed during the service, a raw display of emotion that showed just how deeply the loss cut through the rock community. In a touching tribute to the man who lived life on his own terms, they laid him to rest with his signature black hat and his beloved fishing pole, two items that perfectly encapsulated both his public persona and private passions. Yet even in death, Van Zandt couldn't find peace. In a disturbing turn of events, vandals desecrated his final resting place in June 2000, forcing his family to make the heartbreaking decision to relocate his remains to an undisclosed location. This violation of his eternal rest added another layer of tragedy to an already profound loss. Legacy and the famous feud. Without their charismatic frontman and spiritual core, Lynyrd Skynyrd disbanded, their music falling silent for nearly a decade. When they finally reunited, it was Johnny Van Zandt, Ronnie's younger brother, who stepped into those impossible-to-fill shoes, carrying forward the family legacy while honoring his brother's memory. But perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Van Zandt's legacy was his legendary confrontation with Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. The tension between these rock titans came to a head at the Knebworth Festival in 1976. Van Zandt, known for his rebellious spirit, often performed wearing a shirt that boldly proclaimed, "Who the hell are the Rolling Stones anyway?" A clear statement of defiance against rock's establishment. The showdown occurred when Lynyrd Skynyrd was opening for the Stones. The stage, designed in the iconic Rolling Stones logo, a massive mouth with its protruding tongue, became the battlefield for this clash of egos. When Mick Jagger laid down his one rule that Skynyrd couldn't perform on the tongue portion of the stage, he unknowingly issued a challenge that Van Zandt couldn't resist. True to his nature, Van Zandt saw this restriction as an opportunity for rebellion. In the middle of their set, he led his band straight onto the forbidden tongue section and launched into an electrifying performance of Free Bird. This act of defiance, while legendary, effectively ended any possibility of future collaborations between the two bands. Ronnie Van Zandt's legacy lives on not just in the music he created, but in the spirit of rebellion he embodied. From Jacksonville's backroads to rock's biggest stages, he remained true to himself, a Southern rock rebel who dared to challenge even the biggest names in music history.